Simon lay in bed, his mind buzzing with excitement. Tomorrow was the big day, his first day at a new job. He had been hired by a company that sold cars, and he couldn't wait to see what awaited him. He imagined meeting his new colleagues, finding his desk, and most importantly, earning his first paycheck. There was, however, one small detail Simon kept to himself. He actually hated driving. Cars didn't excite him in the slightest. Still, he had no intention of telling his boss that. After all, in 6 months, the company would reward him with a car of his own. He would accept it graciously, even though he already owned a small blue one that he only drove twice a year when visiting his grandparents. On Monday morning, Simon woke up, pulled a page off his desk calendar and smiled. The picture for the day was of a cheerful cat. It felt like a good omen for the week ahead. Determined to start his new job in a healthy way, he decided to walk to the office. The only problem was that the office was an hour's walk from his house. By the time he arrived, the morning sun had done its work. Simon was sweating heavily despite the generous amount of deodorant he'd used. Unfortunately, it wasn't generous enough. He was introduced to his new coworkers and shown to his desk, and while he enjoyed his tasks, the heat and nerves kept him perspiring all day. Every so often, someone would wrinkle their nose and murmur, "Do you smell that? Is there a dog in here?" Simon pretended not to hear. When he finally made it home, he told himself, "Tomorrow will be better." On Tuesday morning, another page came off the calendar, a playful drawing of a cat batting at a dog. This time, Simon decided the train would be faster and less sweaty than walking. He loaded himself with deodorant again and set off for the station. The train was indeed quicker, but there was a catch. It only ran once an hour. Simon ended up arriving at work 40 minutes too early. The office was still locked, so he waited outside in the freezing cold. He hadn't worn gloves or a scarf, afraid that bundling up would make him overheat later. By the time his boss arrived half an hour later, Simon's face had gone pale and tinged with blue. "Good to see you're so early," his boss said cheerfully. "It's nice to see you're enthusiastic. But are you feeling okay? Your face is blue." "I'm fine," Simon stammered, shivering. Once inside, the heating was switched on, and he slowly thawed out. The day went much more smoothly after that, until he got home. When he tried to take off his shirt, it wouldn't budge. In his attempt to avoid smelling bad, Simon had overdone it on the deodorant, and the fabric had practically glued itself to his skin. The only way to get it off was with a pair of scissors. Unfortunately, it was one of his favorite shirts. He sighed. "Oh well, tomorrow will be better." Wednesday's calendar page showed a dog chasing a cat. Determined to find a middle ground between sweating and freezing, Simon decided to take the bus and use only a small amount of deodorant. But when he arrived at the bus stop, it was packed. The moment the first bus pulled up, everyone surged forward, pushing and shoving to get on. Simon stood at the bus stop, waiting for the next bus. When it finally arrived, it was packed with people, but there was still enough room for him to squeeze in. Even so, he quickly began sweating. A woman somewhere on the bus was shouting about something, though Simon couldn't understand what she was saying. Nobody tried to stop her, and the ride felt longer than usual. By the time Simon reached work, he was a little late and nursing a headache. He explained to his boss that there had been trouble with the bus. His boss gave a small nod and said, "That's all right, these things happen, but it won't happen again, will it?" Then the boss sniffed the air suspiciously. "There's that smell again. Did the dog come back?" That evening, Simon peeled off his shirt. It wasn't stuck to him this time, but it gave off a terrible odor. "Tomorrow will be better," he told himself. "Tomorrow will be better." On Thursday morning, Simon tore off another page from his calendar. Today's picture showed a cat chasing a dog. Determined to avoid another bad start, Simon ordered a taxi instead of taking the bus. He applied plenty of deodorant, far more than usual, and then waited 15 minutes for it to dry before leaving. When the taxi arrived, Simon climbed in and gave the driver the address. But instead of taking the normal route, the driver turned down unfamiliar streets. Simon stared out the window as they passed fields dotted with sheep, thinking, "This isn't the way to work." Eventually, they arrived at the office. "That'll be 50, please," said the driver. 50. Simon's eyes widened. The price was outrageous, but he still pulled the money from his wallet and paid. At work, Simon barely spoke to anyone. He was in no mood for conversation. At lunchtime, he realized he couldn't afford anything to eat. His wallet was empty after paying for the taxi. By the time he got home, his shirt wasn't stuck to him, but his temper was short. In a rush to change, he yanked the shirt off too quickly and tore it. He thought about saying, "Tomorrow will be better," but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he went straight to bed. On Friday, Simon removed yet another calendar page. This time, the picture showed only the cat, its belly full and round, looking satisfied. That morning, Simon decided he would drive to work. He hated driving, but it seemed like the most reliable choice. In his own car, he could keep the temperature comfortable, take the fastest route, and even sit with the heater running if he arrived early. But when he turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. He tried again, still nothing. Simon's frustration boiled over. He had tried everything. Using less deodorant, changing his mode of transport, even forcing himself to drive. Nothing had worked. Without another thought, he went back inside and called his boss. "Hello," his boss answered. Simon let out a long, loud scream into the receiver, then hung up. He climbed into bed. He wasn't going to work. This at least he could control. The end.